we're going to explain how to run GUI applications inside a Linux Docker container. This might seem tricky because Docker containers are typically designed for command line applications, but with the right approach, it's entirely possible. We'll cover several key steps. 1. First, you need a suitable base image. Don't use a minimal image. You'll need an image that includes a desktop environment like XFCE, GNOME, or KDE. These environments provide the necessary X server and libraries for graphical applications to run. Popular choices include images based on Ubuntu or Debian with a desktop environment pre-installed. 2. Next, you need to consider how you'll connect to the graphical interface. The X server inside the container needs to be able to communicate with your host machine's display. One method is using X11 forwarding, which requires configuring your Docker client to forward X11 requests from the container to your display. You'll need to add necessary flags while running the container, ensuring that the display environment variable is correctly set within the container. This typically involves using the eDisplay flag. 3. Another vital aspect is granting access to the X server. Since security is paramount, you'll likely need to adjust your X server's access control settings to permit connections from the container's IP address. This can often be done by editing the authority file or using tools like Xhost. 4. You also need to ensure that the necessary libraries for your GUI application are installed within the Docker container. This includes fonts, shared libraries, and other dependencies which the GUI app depends upon. Your Docker file should include commands to install these, tailored to the specific application. 5. Now you can build your Docker image. Once the base image with the desktop environment and your application and its dependencies are installed, build the image using the Docker build command. 6. Finally, run your container, remembering to include the X11 forwarding configuration. Use the Docker run command with appropriate flags to start the container, map ports if necessary, and expose the application's GUI to your host system. Remember to run this with elevated privileges, using sudo, for X11 forwarding to work correctly. 7. Once the container is running, you should be able to interact with the GUI application just like you would on your host system, though bear in mind performance can sometimes be impacted depending on the resources available. If you encounter issues, double-check your X11 configuration, ensure sufficient permissions are granted, and verify that all necessary libraries are installed in your container. Remember to always prioritize security when configuring X11 forwarding. Restrict access to only the necessary IP addresses and use strong security practices.